Mark cleared his throat. His voice came out steady but quiet. Your Honor, I was hired by Mr. Reeves as a private consultant, cybersecurity. He said his company needed protection. I worked with them for 3 months, built their internal system. Then he refused to pay me. Daniel let out a short laugh under his breath, not loud, but just enough to be heard. Judge Judy's eyes shifted instantly. Did I say something funny? Daniel straightened slightly, still smiling. No, Your Honor, I just think this is being exaggerated. That word hung in the air for a moment. Judge Judy didn't react emotionally. She simply turned back to Mark. You have a contract? Yes, ma'am. He stepped forward and handed over a folder. His hands were steady, but his fingers tightened slightly as he let go of it. Judge Judy opened it. Her eyes scanned quickly, methodically, page by page. Daniel shifted his weight, looking around the courtroom like he was slightly bored. Mark stayed still, watching, waiting. After a few seconds, Judge Judy looked up again. This appears to be a signed agreement, $50,000 upon completion of services. Mr. Reeves, is that your signature? Daniel leaned forward casually, barely glancing. Looks like it. Looks like it? He smiled again. It is mine. Judge Judy nodded once. And did he complete the work? Daniel shrugged lightly. He did something. Whether it was worth $50,000 is another question. There was that tone again, dismissive, light, as if this entire situation existed somewhere beneath him. Mark took a small breath, like he wanted to speak but held back. Judge Judy noticed. You'll get your turn, she said without looking at him. Then her eyes returned to Daniel. What exactly are you disputing? Daniel leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other. The quality, the effectiveness. He claims he secured our systems, but we still had vulnerabilities. Mark shook his head slightly, unable to stay silent. That's not true. Judge Judy raised a hand without even looking. You'll speak when I ask you to. Silence again. She turned back to Daniel. You're telling me you hired him, he worked for 3 months, delivered a system, and now you don't want to pay because you decided it wasn't good enough? Daniel gave a small, almost amused nod. That's essentially it. A quiet pause followed. Judge Judy closed the folder slowly. You run a company, correct? Yes. You sign contracts regularly? Of course. And do you normally decide not to pay people after they've done the work? Daniel smirked slightly. Only when the work doesn't meet the standard. There was another brief silence, not empty, measured. Judge Judy leaned forward just slightly. Do you have proof the system failed? Daniel hesitated for the first time. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. We had concerns internally. That's not what I asked, she said, her tone still calm but sharper now. Do you have proof? Daniel's smile didn't fully disappear, but it tightened. We didn't document everything formally. Mark exhaled slowly, like something inside him had been waiting for that answer. Judge Judy turned to him. All right, now you talk. Mark stepped forward again, more grounded this time. I delivered everything exactly as agreed. Full system audit, firewall rebuild, employee access controls. I even trained their staff. Judge Judy nodded slightly. And do you have evidence of completion? Yes. He handed over another set of documents, emails, reports, system logs. Judge Judy reviewed them carefully. Daniel shifted again, less relaxed now, still composed, but not quite as effortless. After a moment, Judge Judy spoke without looking up. These emails show your team acknowledging the work, thanking him, confirming installation. Daniel said nothing. She flipped another page, and this one says, System fully operational. That came from your CTO. Daniel's jaw moved slightly. Different perspective, he said. Judge Judy finally looked up again. Facts don't have perspectives. They're either true or they're not. That landed heavier than the room expected. Daniel leaned forward now, placing his hands on the table. Your Honor, with respect, in tech, things are not that simple. There was a faint edge in his voice now. Judge Judy tilted her head slightly. In contract law they are. Silence, a longer one this time. Mark stood still, but his posture had changed. There was something steadier in him now. Daniel looked at him briefly, then back at the judge, still confident, but now watching more carefully. Judge Judy closed the second folder and placed both hands on top of it. Let me understand something clearly, she said. You agreed to pay $50,000 for a service. The service was performed. Your own company acknowledged it. And now you're here telling me you just don't feel like paying. Daniel let out another short laugh, this one louder. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, she replied calmly. He shook his head slightly. No, Your Honor. I said the work didn't meet expectations. Judge Judy didn't respond immediately. She just watched him for a second, studying, measuring. Then she asked quietly, what expectations? Daniel opened his mouth to answer, and for the first time since he walked in, nothing came out right away. One morning, a sharply dressed man walked into the courtroom with the kind of confidence that filled the room before he even spoke. His name was Daniel Reeves, a tech company CEO known for building a multi-million-dollar startup in less than 5 years. He wore a tailored navy suit, a polished watch that caught the light with every movement, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Across from him stood Mark Dalton, a man in his early 40s, dressed modestly, hands clasped tightly as if holding onto something invisible. His posture was different, not weak, but heavy, like someone carrying a story that had been sitting too long without being heard. At the center sat Judge Judy Sheindlin, already flipping through the case file with practiced precision. She didn't look up immediately. She never rushed. The room settled into silence the way it always did when she prepared to speak. The clerk announced the case, $50,000, a contract dispute. Judge Judy finally looked up. All right, she said calmly, her eyes moving first to Mark. You're the plaintiff. Tell me why you're here. Daniel opened his mouth, then paused, like he needed a second longer than expected to organize something that should have been simple. The expectation, he said finally, was a fully secure system. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. There's no such thing, she replied immediately. That answer landed differently. Not loud, not dramatic, just precise. Daniel blinked once. In cybersecurity, nothing is ever fully secure. The question is whether reasonable protection was implemented. That's what people pay for. Mark stood still, but his eyes shifted slightly toward the judge, almost surprised by how directly she cut through it. Judge Judy continued, So I'll ask you again, what expectations specifically did he fail to meet? Daniel leaned back, folding his arms now. The relaxed posture from earlier was gone. This one felt more defensive. We experienced a breach. Mark's head turned sharply. That's not true, he said under his breath. Judge Judy raised her hand again. Silence returned instantly. She looked at Daniel. When? Daniel hesitated again. Smaller this time, but still there. A few weeks after he finished. Judge Judy nodded slowly. And you have documentation of this breach? Daniel exhaled lightly. It wasn't formally documented. The same answer, the same gap. Judge Judy didn't look irritated. She looked focused. So, once again, no proof. Daniel shifted slightly. It was handled internally. Convenient, she said. A quiet pause followed. Mark looked down briefly, then back up. His breathing had changed. Slower, more controlled. Judge Judy turned to him. You're telling me there was no breach? Mark shook his head firmly. No, Your Honor. There was an attempted access, not a breach. The system blocked it, exactly the way it was designed to. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, absorbing that. She turned back to Daniel. Do you know the difference between an attempted access and a breach? Daniel didn't answer right away. Yes, he said. Then explain it. Another pause. A breach means unauthorized access was successful. And was it? Daniel's jaw tightened. We had concerns. That's not an answer, Judge Judy said calmly. Silence again. Mark didn't move. Daniel looked forward, then slightly down, then back up again. No, he said finally. The words sat in the room longer than expected. Judge Judy gave a small nod. So the system worked. Daniel quickly leaned forward. That doesn't mean it was worth $50,000. Now there was urgency in his voice. Judge Judy didn't respond immediately. She let that sit. Then she reached for one of the documents again and tapped it lightly. This is your CTO thanking him for securing the system after that attempt. Daniel didn't look at it. That was before we fully evaluated everything. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow slightly. How long after? Daniel hesitated again. A few days. And in those few days, you decided his entire work wasn't worth paying for? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he let out a small, controlled laugh, the same kind as before, but this time it didn't carry the same confidence. Mark watched him, quiet, still. Judge Judy leaned forward just slightly. Mr. Reeves, I've seen this before. Daniel looked up. People with money think they can redefine agreements after the fact. They think if they say something wasn't good enough, that replaces a contract. Her voice was still calm, but now it carried weight. That's not how it works here. Daniel's expression tightened. With respect, Your Honor. No, she cut in, not raising her voice, but ending his sentence instantly. You'll listen. Silence fell again, a heavier one now. Judge Judy glanced down at the file once more, then back up at him. You run a company. You understand liability, correct? Yes. And you understand what happens when you sign something and don't honor it? Daniel didn't answer. Judge Judy tilted her head slightly. I'll tell you, it becomes enforceable. Mark exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly. Daniel looked at him for a second, just a second, then back to the judge, still composed, but something underneath was shifting. Judge Judy picked up another sheet. This invoice, dated, submitted, no response denying the work, no complaint filed at the time, no notice of dissatisfaction. She placed it down. Nothing. Daniel spoke again, more controlled now. We were evaluating. For how long? Another pause. A few weeks. And during those weeks, did you communicate any issues to him? Daniel didn't answer immediately. No, he said finally. Judge Judy nodded slowly. So you stayed silent, let him believe everything was accepted, then refused to pay. Daniel inhaled slightly. That's exactly what the timeline shows, she said. Mark's hands unclenched slightly. For the first time, there was something like relief in his face. Not full, but starting. Judge Judy leaned back again, her gaze steady on Daniel. You keep saying not worth it. That's your argument. Daniel nodded once. Yes. She studied him for a moment. Then she asked, very quietly, what is your company worth? The question landed differently. Daniel blinked. I'm not sure that's relevant. Judge Judy didn't move. Answer the question. Daniel hesitated. Several million. How many? Roughly 8. Judge Judy nodded once. And how much did you pay your legal team to be here today? Daniel shifted slightly. I don't see how much. Another pause. Probably around 10,000. Judge Judy let that sit for a second. Then she asked, just as calmly as before, and you're here arguing over 50? The room went quiet. Not just silent, still. Daniel didn't laugh this time. He didn't speak either. Mark looked at him, then quickly away. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her hands resting on the file. "That's not a business decision," she said. "That's something else." Daniel's jaw tightened again. "What do you mean?" Judge Judy held his gaze. "I mean, people don't spend $10,000 to avoid paying $50 unless there's a reason they don't want that payment on record." That shifted everything, completely. Daniel's posture changed instantly, not dramatically, but enough. His shoulders stiffened, his expression lost that last bit of ease. Mark looked up again, sharper now. Judge Judy didn't look away. "So I'll ask you one more question," she said. Her voice stayed calm, controlled, but the weight behind it had changed. "What exactly were you trying to hide by not paying him?" The question didn't echo, it settled. Daniel didn't respond right away. For the first time since he walked into the courtroom, he looked like someone who had run out of prepared answers. His eyes shifted briefly, not toward Mark, but toward the table in front of him, like something there might help him avoid the moment. "There's nothing to hide," he said finally, but the confidence was thinner now. Judge Judy didn't react. She simply watched him, giving the silence space to do its work. "Then answer the question," she said. Daniel exhaled slowly, adjusting his sleeve as if buying himself another second. "We had internal disagreements about the system." Judge Judy tilted her head slightly. "With who?" "Our executive team." "Names?" Daniel hesitated again. "Our CTO, finance." Judge Judy picked up the document she had already referenced and held it up slightly. "This is from your CTO. It says, and I'm paraphrasing, 'System is secure and functioning as intended.'" She lowered it. "So I'll ask you again, what disagreement?" Daniel's jaw tightened. They changed their opinion. "When?" "After further review." "How much further?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. "A week or two." Judge Judy nodded slowly. "And during that week or two, did anything fail?" Daniel's lips pressed together. "No." "Was there any breach?" "No." "Any loss?" "No." Each answer came quicker, but heavier. Mark stood still, but his eyes didn't leave Daniel now. Judge Judy placed the document back on the desk. "So your system worked. Your company confirmed it worked. Nothing failed. Nothing was lost, and yet you decided not to pay him." Daniel shifted in his seat. "We had concerns about long-term stability." Judge Judy didn't miss a beat. "Based on what?" Silence again. Daniel looked forward, then slightly to the side. "Industry standards." "Which ones?" Another pause. He didn't answer. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "You're using vague language to cover a very simple situation." Her tone was still even, but now it carried something sharper. "You agreed to pay, he did the work, you kept the benefit, and then you refused to pay." Daniel shook his head, a little faster now. "That's not accurate." "Then correct it," she said. He opened his mouth, stopped, closed it again. The room stayed quiet. Mark's breathing was steady, but his hands were no longer tight. They rested more naturally now, like something inside him was slowly letting go. Judge Judy picked up another paper from the file. "This is interesting," she said. Daniel looked up. It was the first time he looked uncertain about what she was holding. She glanced at it briefly, then back at him. "Invoice timestamp, email chain, internal forwarding." She tapped the page lightly. "You received his invoice, then within 20 minutes, you forwarded it to your finance department with a note." Daniel didn't speak. Judge Judy read directly from the page. "Hold payment, reviewing contract exposure." The words settled into the room like something heavier than anything said before. Mark's head turned sharply toward Daniel. Daniel didn't look at him. Judge Judy lowered the paper slowly. "That's not a quality concern," she said. "That's a legal concern." Daniel finally spoke, but his voice was quieter now. "We were just being cautious." "Cautious about what?" Silence. Judge Judy didn't wait long this time. Exposure to what? Daniel's fingers pressed lightly against the table. No answer. Judge Judy leaned back again, studying him carefully. You didn't question his work when it was delivered, she said. You questioned whether you could get away without paying. Daniel shook his head, but it was slower now, less certain. That's not fair. It's exactly what your own email says. Mark exhaled again, but this time there was something different in it. Not tension, release. Judge Judy continued, and then you waited. No complaint, no rejection, no notice, just silence. She paused for a moment, until he asked for his money. Daniel looked down briefly, then back up, still trying to hold something together. We believed the contract had weaknesses. Judge Judy nodded once. So this was about finding a way out. Daniel didn't answer. The silence answered for him. Judge Judy placed both hands on the file and leaned forward slightly. Let me explain something to you. Her voice was still calm, but now it carried a finality that hadn't been there before. In business, you don't get to test a system, keep the benefit, confirm it works, and then go looking for loopholes so you don't have to pay. Daniel said nothing. Mark didn't move. The entire room felt like it had shifted into something sharper, clearer. Judge Judy picked up the contract again, flipping to the signature page. You signed this. She placed it down. You agreed to the terms. She tapped the document lightly. And you received exactly what you paid for. Daniel's voice came out lower now. We didn't believe it met long-term expectations. Judge Judy shook her head slightly. That argument would matter if you had raised it when the work was delivered. You didn't. She paused. You accepted it. Another silence. Daniel leaned back slightly, but it didn't look like confidence anymore. It looked like distance. Judge Judy looked at him for a long second. Then she asked one final question. When you forwarded that email and wrote, reviewing contract exposure, were you already planning not to pay him? Daniel didn't answer. Not immediately. His eyes stayed on the judge. Then slowly, yes. The word didn't need volume. It carried everything. The word stayed in the air longer than anything else that had been said. No one moved right away. Mark didn't react immediately. He just stood there, looking at Daniel like he had been waiting for that moment longer than he realized. Not for revenge, not even for satisfaction, just for something honest. Daniel leaned back slowly, the last layer of resistance gone. His shoulders dropped slightly, not defeated, but no longer pretending. Judge Judy didn't speak for a few seconds. She let the silence settle into something clear and undeniable. Then she nodded once. All right, she said. She looked down at the file, closing it with a calm, deliberate motion. When she looked back up, her expression hadn't changed, but the direction of the case had, completely. You planned not to pay him after confirming the work was done, she said. That's not a dispute over quality. That's bad faith. Daniel didn't interrupt this time. Judge Judy continued. You used the system. Your company benefited from it. There was no breach, no loss, no failure. And instead of honoring the agreement, you tried to find a way around it. Each sentence landed clean. Mark's posture shifted slightly, like something inside him was finally aligning. Judge Judy turned briefly toward him. You did the work you were hired to do. Mark nodded once. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She turned back to Daniel. And you made a calculated decision not to pay. Daniel exhaled quietly. We were protecting the company. Judge Judy shook her head slightly. No, she said. You were protecting your money. There was no anger in her voice, just clarity. And you chose to do it by ignoring a signed agreement. Daniel looked down for a moment. The room stayed still. Judge Judy placed her hands on the desk again, steady and composed. This court doesn't reward that behavior. She paused, just long enough for the weight of that statement to settle. Then she spoke clearly. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $50,000. Mark closed his eyes for a brief second, just a second, then opened them again. Relief didn't come all at once. It moved slowly across his face, like something heavy being set down piece by piece. Daniel didn't react outwardly, but the stillness in him had changed. It wasn't confidence anymore. It was acceptance. Judge Judy wasn't finished. "And let me add something," she said. Daniel looked up again. "When you run a company, your reputation isn't built on how much money you make. It's built on whether people can trust you to keep your word." She held his gaze. "Today, you showed exactly how you handle that." Daniel said nothing. Judge Judy gave a small nod, signaling the end. "We're done here." The gavel didn't need to be loud. The decision already was. Mark gathered his papers slowly, but his hands were no longer tight. There was a quiet steadiness in him now. Not victory, something deeper. Closure. Daniel remained seated for a moment longer, staring at the table in front of him. The same place he had looked when the question first caught him off guard. But now there was nothing left to avoid. Around them, the courtroom began to move again. Chairs shifted, papers gathered, voices returned in low tones. But the center of the room held on to the moment just a little longer. Because in the end, it wasn't the money that defined what happened there. It was the one question he couldn't answer, until he finally did.